Consider it a privilege that I can look at you and say, I'm glad to be a part of the family of God. I wouldn't want it to be any different. Here sits my brothers and sisters. They're just as real to me as any blood brother in the natural that I might have. This is my brothers and sisters. I'm grateful to God for each and every one of you. And I pray that in this life, I might always be able to say something that is encouraging and something that might help each one of you to better understand things concerning the Word of God. If you have your Bibles now, turn with me in the 17th chapter of the book of Revelation. I would like to point you now to the chart. Since 1965, we've been slowly moving toward an era of time where truth begins to narrow things down. And we're actually, brothers and sisters, in here. Because as we get closer and closer to the final point, more of this starts blending in with that. The parable of Jesus, he would send forth his angels, and he would gather the tares and bind them in bundles. When we think of the religious world tonight, all the religious activities that's going on, don't think that is all foolish virgins. It's not. That is your tares being bound in bundles. Now, there's a lot of people, but Brother Jackson, I know good people. They could have said that in the days of Jesus, too. There could have been people in that day defended the Pharisees and the Sadducees, but they're good people. Keep in mind, God's family is not made up of good people according to your and my standard. They're people made up, and they're made by the grace of God, redeemed out of the world. And some that have been redeemed while they was in the world, they were pretty bad characters. A lot worse off than some that's out there yet. But we have to see the family of God from God's viewpoint, not ours. There's something I want to bring out this tonight in relationship to what we was on this morning. And once again, I am not attacking a man to destroy the man's ministry. God has allowed a lot of men to go forth in these last days to say a lot of things. And while the men was perpetrating these things, they thought they was saying the truth. They were giving a picture of something other that maybe is prophetic, the way it looks and feels to them. But I have to say, as we get closer to the end, truth is going to narrow down to become a very small marginal line. I say that out of respect for the grace of God that he's showed me in life. In the 17th chapter, like I've said before, the 13th chapter gives you a picture of time. And I associate with the closing of World War II, when Europe lay in a desolated state of ruins all over. For some reason or other, America was used economically to help rebuild that giant area that eventually is going to become the 10 horns, the restoration back of what we see in Revelation 13. as they begin to rise slowly out of the sea, the mass of people. The years that has transpired since then, if you look at it right, you've seen that beast that used to be the Roman beast slowly coming back again to take its last day form. But while it was not yet the operating beast, that's the way we must look at it. It's just been in the slow process of being brought back to life again. But when we come to the 17th chapter, that takes the same beast that now is being restored. There it is. It's in world position for that period of rulership. Now let's take a look at it tonight, because I have no doubt in my mind, brothers and sisters, there's a condition arising in the Middle East. When it's fulfilled, it's going to affect the world to such a point, it's going to necessitate the European beast to come to the forefront. Why? Because it's going to be the only economy that's going to be able to survive and hold out to that time. The angel has came to John and showed him the judgment of the great whore system. That's the Roman Catholic Church. But then the angel in the 7th verse says, "And the angel said unto me, Wherefore didst thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman." Well, we know that now is Roman Catholicism. And keep in mind, in 96 A.D., the Roman Church has not yet come into existence. So how can Richard Gamm say anything about what took place in 96 A.D. when John was taken up into heaven? You catch my point? All of these pictorial prophetic pictures are all for the future. So I have to say what he's seen in chapter 6 was also how the future was going to climax, when there was something on earth that would relate to that. Now then, and of the beast that carrieth her, which hath the 7 heads and 10 horns. Well, that we see that in the 13th chapter. But now here it is in operation. The beast that thou sawest. Now notice the language. Was. That's a past tense. And is not. That puts it in a present tense, doesn't it? And shall ascend out of the bottomless pit. Well, you know and I know, no materialistic, corporal-bodied anything comes out of the bottomless pit. What comes out of the bottomless pit? It's a spirit. So therefore, we can say this. Whatever the spirit was on that beast, as we see it in the 13th chapter, that's what ruled it when it has come to that period of time when it was wounded. When it was wounded, then that spirit left it. It made it look like it died. But that spirit, it's Satan, brothers and sisters, went back into the bottomless pit. And go into perdition. That means at the end of the tribulation, when the Lord comes now, he will destroy the life of the beast by taking that spirit and casting it into the bottomless pit. And they that dwell on the earth, that's the living population then, shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life. That takes in we will say, the masses of people that are alive at that time. In the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was, past tense, is not right now, and yet it is. Now, brothers and sisters, using the old country terminology, that's just as plain as the nose on your face. The angel of the Lord is actually telling John, this beast is not something new brought up in the 20th century. It's something that's been of old. But it's how God, by his grace, allows the devil to restore it, for it to be brought back alive. So it was. There was a period of time it wasn't. So we cannot associate that with Egypt, Assyria, and all of that. If you understand my point. Now the angel takes and gets more dramatic with this. And here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains. That makes it geographical, on which the woman sitteth. Which literally means it is Rome, the city sitting on 7 geographical hills. That's the seat of this woman's system, Roman Catholicism. Now, when we can see then the geographical identification, now it takes on the second-fold meaning. Verse 10, and there are 7 kings. Now keep in mind, brothers and sisters, John, though he lived in 96 AD physically, but through these, by being taken up into the heavens and seeing these different prophetic panoramic scenes, you have to associate them with time that they're related to. And John's carried plumb into the future tense, when this beast will shine and show forth itself. And I have to say, brothers and sisters, that's getting ready to absolutely be manifested to the world right in the short period of time in front of us. Now then, when I say that, these 7 heads that he's going to describe to us now are not 7 territorial geographical kingdoms, which he makes it. These heads have all got to stay and be related to Rome, how it has ruled, affected, and been identified as the last world beast that was ever to rule the world until the coming of Christ. How it's transpired and went through these different stages. You don't take these heads and throw them around to different natural geographical kingdoms. They've got to stay in Rome. Because if Rome, under the old imperialship, is what brought it into existence for world domination to fulfill the 4th beast that was to rule to the end of time, then you cannot take them heads and be dotting around here and there into 7 different geographical territorial things. How many realize that? It's got to stay in Rome. And that's why I have to say, I've always loved history. I never had no problem with it. So when it comes to something like this, to study about it, keep in mind, I had access to a lot of histories. I could have went and read and read and read. But I'll never forget, for a long time, brothers and sisters, that thought was in my mind. There are 7 kings. I knew them word kings is speaking of each one in a singular. There's 7 distinct ones. 5 are fallen. One is, wherever John has been elevated to see this, 5 are fallen. So God is showing him now a breakdown of the old imperial Roman monarchy, how that giant head has evolved politically and began to go through these 7 distinct changes, all related to time. 5 are fallen. That puts it all in the past, from where John was standing to see this. And what is? So where John was standing, there has to be a reason why God says one is. And the other, pointing to the 7th, is not yet come. So that puts that in the future. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. And the beast, that's talking about the spirit of the thing, that was and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7. So it goes to show, when you go to Daniel 7, and he saw this last beast that come up, he saw it had 10 horns, but then he saw another little horn come up and magnify itself above the others. And in that horn was the eyes of a man and a mouth speaking great things. The mouth speaks authority. So now then, when we see these things here, this 8, keep in mind, as on Daniel 7, that was a mystical horn, so is this a mystical head. How many realize that? Yet he's of the 7. You cannot add 8 heads to it. Keep that in mind. I prayed, I said, Lord, there's got to be a historical answer to this. Because I had read different things put out by different doctors of prophecy. Some words I would read up to a point, and then I could say, this is not right, and I stopped it. And one day I was on the tractor just riding. And just like brothers and sisters, a thought dropped in my mind. All these kings have got to be related to the same source of authority, only scattered through different periods of time. We realize this, brothers and sisters. When you would go into ancient history that deals with the beginning and the ending of all of these empires, it'll give you a whole category of men. This history I have takes the Medo-Persian Empire, gives you all the kings from the time it starts to the time it ends. But keep in mind, during that Medo-Persian Empire, there's only 3 that stands out. That's the 3 ribs that was in the mouth of the bear. And these ribs said to the head, arise, devour much flesh. Now you say, well, ribs don't talk. No, but you got to understand, what did the ribs mean? Cyrus, Darius, and Cambyses was the 3 kings that brought it in the period it fulfilled prophecy. But as the life of it began to die away, there's a long strain of them. So when we come to Rome, from the time you go back, brothers and sisters, to Caesar Augustus, you get a lot of Caesars. And I have to say this. Keep in mind, brothers and sisters, keep your intelligence. On these heads is the name written blasphemy. Blasphemy is not written on the horns. How many realize that? I thought a long time. Blasphemy. Why is this word blasphemy written on the heads? It's got to come from a meaning. Then when I went to the dictionary and I looked up the word imperial, it means sovereign, universal. And in this respect, as we related to the ancient Caesars, they held a blasphemous title over the whole Roman kingdom. That's why when I read how that the ancient Caesars, when they would be making a parade, celebrating over a war and a victory such, here's all their subjects running the streets and the roads in front of them, throwing palm leaves in front of them, falling down on their face, worshiping the gods that the Caesar represents to them. That makes his office a blasphemous title. How many realize this? And that word blasphemy is written on all of them heads. Then when I look at the title of the Pope, being the Vicar Christ, and when the time came that he is the 8th head that takes over the last form of old imperial Roman government in its final political decay, then the word imperial, sovereign, universal ruler, now is attributed to the Pope. Because the Pope now holds. He's the Vicar Christ. He is representative of Christ or God on earth. And I'm going to read to you what he said when that 8th system took over. It's a blasphemous expression. Even the kings of Europe shocked by what he said. Now, brothers and sisters, let me finish this. Even he is the 8th. So you don't add another head, but you blend it with something. And is of the 7. And the end of it all is it goes into perdition. Because that's when Christ comes in the 19th chapter. where here is the beast, as it's described in the 7th chapter, sitting ready to make war against the advent of Christ. Only an apostate world like we're now living in will have the idiocy to say such a thing and to be in such a position. The kings of the earth stood ready to make war against him. Now then, and the 10 horns, and that's talking about the territories of Europe, which thou sawest are 10 kings, are kingdoms, which have received no kingdom, that means universal kingdom, as yet, but receive power, recognition, 1 hour or an appointed period of time with the beast. And that's what they've been working on for the last 30-some years, since World War II. These have one mind in the end, and shall give their power and strength with the beast. These have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. Notice this verse. These same 10 horns is what you take to the Revelation 19. These shall make war with the Lamb. Why? Because they're all apostate societies. These shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and they that are with him. And brothers and sisters, that's why we're preaching tonight. Let's get this picture straight. Because if we get it straight and know what it is, we're coming to be represented with him. And we're going to be right in that vast army. Yes, and they that are with him are called and chosen and faithful. Brother, I want to be a part of that. I don't care where it's at in that. I just want to be a part of God's kingdom in that respect. Now, as God dealt with me sitting there on the tractor, I said, Lord, somewheres this has got to come out and be related somewheres how history relates to this picture. Because all of this transpires over a long period of time. I began to go through the different books that I've got. As I've said this morning, I've never bought a book. It's always came to me just when I needed it. And by the way, if any of you doubt that what I say, I know what Roman Catholicism stands for, what her foundation is, what her belief. I've got an old book that's written by her, The Glories of the Mother Church. It tells you every cardinal teaching that she upholds. If you want to look at it, all I ask you to do, remember where you got it. But if you want to sharpen your mind and really see how dogmatic I'm not talking about the Catholic person. Most of them just takes for granted what they say and lets it go that way. That's why I say they just got religion. But you've got to have an experience to have salvation. Because salvation is something that deals with your spirit. And it helps to change you from what you used to be and what once was into a new creature. So if anybody really wants to check it out and see really what do they teach, I'll be glad to loan it to you. But please don't take it home and store it somewhere and forget all about it. I want it back. Because this book was gave to me also. Now then, I had this book. And I said, Lord, somewheres in one of these histories, there's an answer. And you know, brothers and sisters, this is a secular history book. It's copyrighted in 1917. But the contents that I'm going to read from it is taken from other background histories that go way back many, many years. And when I read it, you would think, whoever had this mind to put it up this way must have read the Bible. And yet nothing is even referred to as in the Bible. Now, I want to take you tonight, brothers and sisters. I'm not going to try to finish it, but I'm going to go slow just to show you. When true historians that are dealing with facts and time and world political ideologies, and they've been allowed to write and record in time how some of these things stood out that have affected people, God has saw to it. They will always print truth. You don't have to prefabricate history. It's got to be a recorded fact. How many realize that? I want to just show you, by the grace of God, how exact this history writer was. As I read to you this morning, it told you precisely that Rome was built on 7 hills, didn't it? So I don't have to add any to a thing or take away from that. So tonight, brothers and sisters, I'm going to show you the dates, if you want to set it down, as the historian writes it and breaks it all down. So simple. When I got to reading this, I thought, oh, Lord, now I can see. Keep in mind, from the beginning of the Roman dynasty, that starts with the beginning of Caesar's, they were all related, from brother to half-brother, or from brother to a nephew, or a cousin, but they all come right on down the line. When we come to Nero, who lived in 69 AD, that's when he has sent his general Vespasian, who was camped in the east with a large Roman garrison army in Syria. When he'd heard about the revolt and everything that the Jews was going on in Jerusalem, Nero of Rome, 69 AD, has sent his Roman army by Vespasian to come into the land to put down the revolt. So this is the beginning of just exactly how that old imperial head became to an end. Then the Roman Senate began to lift up men to try to establish another monarchy system that was just as dynamic as the old Caesar kindreds were. But let's watch. Political evolution was in process. So I'm going to read. During Nero's reign, half of Rome was laid in ashes, that's all in the previous years, by a great fire. They blamed the Christians for setting it on fire. And it raged for a week. But a new Rome speedily arose. It was a much finer city than the old, with wide streets and straight ones instead of narrow alleys, and with houses of good stone in place of wooden hovels. Except for the loss of the temples and public buildings, the fire was a blessing in disguise. After the death of Nero, which he died in 69 AD, that traced the dynasty. It became extinct from Julius and Caesar Augustus. There was no one who could legally claim the throne as kinward. 69 AD. Now let me take that to a historian, Josephus. He was a Jew. He was a leader of some of the Jews in this revolt. When I read his history, he remembers how Vespasian came from the north with his army, encamped around Jerusalem, just as Jesus said in Matthew's writing. The city closed the gates. The Roman army, as they approached it, they was constantly being bombarded by the insurgents of the Jews running out and engaging them and killing a lot of Romans, and then back to the city. This so infuriated the Roman commanders, once they have gained a circumference of the city, they established their fortifications with a fixed end. Then they set a large army to make a wide circle out to the whole regions of Judea. Practically in every village and town that there was anybody left there that had not fled to the city, most all of the male people was killed by the Romans. Once the siege sets in motion, it says in here, close to 1 million Jews perished in that siege. With this in mind, I'm saying this slow so you can remember, because I have no intentions of ever repeating it again. I'm saying this to prove to you, brothers and sisters, my brother used something he should not have been dealt with. I know what I'm talking about tonight, because I can say this. God gave this picture to me. It's precise. It fits the Bible. It don't jump from here to there. With this in mind, when finally then the Romans set their battle in complete, to bring Jerusalem in complete surrender, when the outer walls have been penetrated by the Romans, Vespasian was making his approach. Josephus decided then that he was going to be taken prisoner. But him being a Jew, God had gave him a vision. As he went out to meet Vespasian, Josephus approached Vespasian and said, O Vespasian, knowest thou not? This day thou shalt become emperor of Rome. Vespasian, in Josephus' writing, thought, this Jewish man is trying to flatter me. But after Josephus has surrendered that particular day to him and his men, in a short order of time there was a Roman courier, a rider, approached the Roman army with an order from the Roman Senate, which stated, Vespasian returned to Rome, for Nero is dead, and the Senate chooses you to take his place. There Josephus' prophecy was fulfilled that very day. Now I bring these things out, brothers and sisters, to let my critics know. I don't jump to a conclusion, this is this and this is it. I try to settle it all in a finished picture. Now from 69, because eventually as Titus taken over the command, then Jerusalem fell August the 10th, 69 A.D. Vespasian is already in Rome. He is not a kindred to the Caesars. But the Senate has taken him. He's a military man. They've appointed him to be an emperor. From 69 to 96 A.D., the very year that John is giving the revelation of what we're writing about, Vespasian, Titus, and Domitian, his two sons, that have reigned in his place, they're soldier emperors. They've held on strong. They've tried to reestablish another kind of leadership in Rome that's just as dynamic as the Caesar before. But I'm going to read to you what the history says that followed. After the death of Nero, the dynasty that traced its descent from Julius and Augustus became extinct. there was no one who could legally claim the vacant throne. The Senate, which in theory had the appointment of a successor, was too weak to exercise its powers. The imperial guard and the legions on the frontiers placed their own candidates in the field. The Roman world fell into anarchy, and Italy became once more the seat of civil war. The throne was finally seized by the able general Flavius Vespasianus, supported by the armies of the east. He and his two sons, Titus and Domitian, are called the Flavian Caesars. But keep in mind, none of them are related to the old ones. During the reign of Vespasian, it tells about the Jews and their fall. So we'll come on to that. And we're working to the hour of 96 A.D., because that's how long them three, their period lasted, from 69 to 96. So the history. And John saw his revelation in 96 A.D. Don't forget that. Now then, you don't know how I felt, having never really studied this, but in my mind, five are fallen, five are fallen, five are fallen, five are fallen, five are fallen. I said, it's got to be in history somewhere. But that day I sat down and I opened this up. And here's was. The five rulers that followed the soldier emperors starts with Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Antonius Pius, and Marcus Aurelius. Each one of these has had their period. And in history, they're called the five good emperors. I did not write this history, but the historian himself has broke it down exactly to fit the Bible. That's why I said, thank you, Lord. I can see it now. This man did not even have the Bible in mind when he wrote all of these successors of this whole Roman period. And then he tells you what each one of these men did. When we come to the last of them five, the last of the good emperors was Marcus Aurelius, was a thinker and a student, and it tells all down through here. And they ruled from 96 AD to 180. That was a period. It was consistent. Because Rome, at least, has been established a peaceful setting. That's why, brothers and sisters, we have to look at how the Bible read. Five are fallen. Why did he choose that fall? Five. Why didn't he mention the three previous to that? The point is this. It's not every king, or whatever you want to call him, that stands out in the symbolic image we're looking at. It's how each one fits a certain period. What was his aim? How did it affect the kingdom? And how is it related to God's way of prophecy? That's what we have to look at. So therefore, I will read what happened then 180. Because these five reigned from 96, the year that John saw the vision, till 180, when the five have moved into past ground. Let's see what the last one was. In his period of time, there was wars in the east and so forth. Campaigns along the Euphrates and the Germans on the Danube and the Rhine. These wars revealed the weakness of the frontiers and rapidly growing strength of the barbarians. After the death of Marcus Aurelius, the empire of Rome, that had been established consistently through the Caesars, imperial, the empire entered on a downward course. Means political decay, if you understand. And from 180 till we come to that time of the sixth head. There was nothing but wars and upheavals. As this historian writes, the last years leading up, going toward this period. It said within a single year, 237 and 238 A.D., 6 rulers was chosen, worshipped, and then murdered by their troops. You little know, said one of these imperial phantoms, what a poor thing it is to be an emperor. Now think of it, brothers and sisters. Here, years later, how helpless the emperor seems to be. But look what he was when he was a Caesar. The whole world trembled. That's the picture we've got to see. From that ancient city, now the position of leadership is crumbling. It's how Satan is being allowed by God to tear one down, but slowly come up another way. And he's the magician that's going to bring on one secretly. The close of the 3rd century thus found the empire engaged in a struggle for existence. No part of the Roman world had escaped the ravages of war. The fortifications of the capital city by the Emperor Aurelian was itself a testimony to the intended conditions of affairs. The situation was desperate. Under an able ruler such as Aurelian, Rome proved to be still strong enough to repel her forces. It was the work of the even more capable Diocletian to establish the empire so solidly that it endured for another 100 years. From his period of time, then, brothers and sisters, these are transition periods. What we call the 5. Keep in mind, Nero, and then here's Vespasian and his 2 sons. Then the 5 that are fallen, and from 180 from to 300 and something another is this long period of struggle of upheavals and everything else. Nothing's consistent. But we've got to see when we come to this 6th one. And I'm going to try to do my best, brothers and sisters, to be very consistent with this. My pages here are so marked up, you'll have to just bear with me here until I get the right one, because I don't intend to read a whole lot. Because the one I want to get here, brothers and sisters, is about Constantine. During the hour leading up to Constantine's period, starting in the 3rd century, there was Rome, see, over at Constantinople, that's in the Grecian area, and Rome, there was 2 capitals. This represents the 2-leg that the ancient empire was represented by in the vision of Daniel. How many realize that? But when they put the authority here in these 2 capitals, there was constantly a clashing going on. One here and one here. It kind of came down, there was a conflict between Constantine and Maximus or something like that. That he had the other one killed. And Constantine took over then the remnants of the existing empire for leadership. And it says right in here, during his period of time, Constantine, he was a pagan, but he's been able to arrest the kingdom, take over complete authority, to establish, we will say, a consistent form of government. Then when early Christianity in the 3rd century was already going through upheavals about the Godhead, hundreds of bishops from all over the old Roman world was now then contesting the Trinity and so on and so forth. When Constantine then, on one of his campaigns in the East to put down a revolt, I got another history that covers his period. Late in the evening, He went out to do sacrifice and to do oblations to his God. But then all of a sudden he sees a vision. And as he looks up, he's seen the sign of the cross of the Christians right in the air before him. And the words, "By this thou shalt conquer, and thou shalt overcome." Now, a lot of people have said, well, God gave him a vision, he was going to become a Christian. I want to say this tonight, brothers and sisters. This is a day there's a lot of people having visions and things. The Bible says that visions, in the right way, are going to be manifested because they're signs of the outpouring and the workings of God's Spirit. But keep in mind, the devil can give visions also. He's not going to give you a vision, brothers and sisters, to let you see how hell looks. If he's out to deceive you, he's going to give you a vision that looks so much right, but it's going to cause you to get on the wrong foot and on the wrong course. When Constantine seen that, he addresses his troops and says that the God of the Christians has given him this vision. So he immediately had every one of his soldiers to paint the sign of the cross on his shield. The next day when they go into battle, they were victorious. You can see what that victory made him feel like. Then when he began to confer with the Christian people of the society, then he finds that they're all in the delusion and everything with this Godhead thing. He then sets the Council of Nicaea. And this was established by a Roman emperor, Constantine. But he is supposed to have become a believer in Christianity. After that is over, brothers and sisters, Constantine is the man, the sixth head, that succeeds in introducing Christendom to the state. Because he makes a decree, no more will Christians be persecuted. That was not done under the five heads. This was done under the sixth head. It was a trick that God allowed the devil to use. And from then on, brothers and sisters, the state now is introduced to this feminine church religious system for courtship. Because the histories declare, from the politicians, the generals, the high-ranking officers of the army, they all became converted to Christendom, only in mentality. It's not an experience. How many realize that? That shows you how that sixth head, it was definitely necessary that angel tell John. And what is? He was standing exactly at the sixth head. What it would do. But he says, there's another one. He has not yet come, so he's appointing the head. So leaving the hour of Constantine, after the Constantine period, brothers and sisters, and he dies, again the history says, the Roman regime headed into chaos. And brothers and sisters, territories begin to withdraw. Here's when the horns really begin to get their full identity on the ancient areas of Europe. Not that they weren't already there, but here's where the horns really did get their territorial freedom. From then on, brothers and sisters, there was a consistent war, struggle, upheavals, and everything else. There was no one leader that has been able to establish a consistent system. Now then, we come to the hour of Charlemagne. Because Charlemagne is this seventh head. Keep in mind, from Constantine's hour, Christianity has grew. It became influential in all of the Roman social functions. I read in here how more and more these rulers began to lean toward the church. for the church to help them in their territorial functions. Charlemagne was a man. He had great admiration for the Pope. All these things, brothers and sisters, when I opened this book up and I read, I thank the Lord that He has allowed me to have possession of it. I didn't write it. And there's nothing in here that says that the writer even had the Bible in mind. But the way he takes these different periods of the Roman system and how it breaks up and so on and so forth, I said, that fits exactly what the angel was telling Daniel. 5 are fallen, 1 is. And what happened from Constantine's hour till Charlemagne's hour, the church has been introduced to the state for courtship, and the church is becoming more and more a worldly system. Truth is taking a back seat. Tradition comes in and takes its place. Now then, Charlemagne, the champion of Christendom. Wonder why this historian would even write it like that. And the foremost ruler of Europe, seemed to the men of his day the rightful successor of the Roman emperors. He had their power, and now he was to have their name in the year 800 A.D. So from 3 something another of Constantine hour to 800, you can see how many years has went by. Inconsistent. But Christendom is getting weaker from spirituality, but she's becoming more and more a worldly institution. Because as she becomes more and more flirting with the world, then it gives the devil a chance to start elevating this 7th head. In the year 800 AD, the Frankish king visited Rome to investigate certain accusations made against the Pope Leo III by his enemies in the city. Charlemagne absolved Leo of all wrongdoing and restored to him his office. Afterwards, on Christmas Day, Charlemagne went to Old St. Peter's Church where the Pope was saying Mass. As the king dressed in the rich robes of the Roman leader, knelt in prayer before the high altar. Now see, brothers and sisters, a political man, a ruler, is now then kneeling in the cathedral before the altar of Christendom. The Pope suddenly placed on his head a golden crown, while all the people cried out with one voice, "Long live and victory to," listen, Charles Augustus, the great and pacific emperor. Because he was the one that started a whole imperial system way before Nero's hour. How many realize it? Long live Augustus. They're making Charlemagne equal to him. Crowned by God was nothing but the Pope. Although Charlemagne appears to have been surprised by the Pope's act, we know that he wished to become emperor. The imperial title would confer upon him greater dignity and honor, though not greater power that he possessed as king of the Franks and of the Lombards. The Pope in turn was glad to reward the man who had protected the church and had done so much to spread the Catholic faith. 800 AD, Charlemagne, with an army of the battle axe and the sword, they went all over Europe. And brothers and sisters, if you did not believe in the Catholic faith and accept it, you died at the hand of the sword or the spear. You were forced to become a believer by the power of the imperial sword. This covers the period of time that Brother Stroman and them tells about the conflict that went on in Norway. That's when the same spirit of that thing tried to penetrate Norway. And right near the city of Verdal, is where they were defeated. All because Charlemagne was a man that he's honored the Pope, and the Pope has honored him. All this plays a two-handed game. Now you're in the seventh stage. Keep in mind, the seventh stage shows the weakening of that office of the ancient emperors. Now between the death of Charlemagne, you go through another transition period. Because we're going to work toward the hour when the eighth one that comes along eventually takes over. Under Charlemagne, he's lifting Christendom up and they're placed equal. But when we go to Otto the Great, this gives the Pope of that hour an opportunity to begin to elevate his office above the emperors, and it wasn't long. The eighth head becomes a complete spiritual, religious power that takes over the last form of imperial power. And when that has come about, brothers and sisters, from then on, no leader of Europe could contest the Pope. Up till that time, emperors would have wars and conflicts with other leaders. But from this hour on, brothers and sisters, this eighth head did not put eight heads on it, because it's a conflict between the, we will say, Satan and the religious forces to gain domination over the last form of political power. How many realize that? And this eighth head is the rising of that little horn that Daniel saw, that eventually rose itself above the other 10 horns, because it had eyes of a man and a mouth speaking great things. No, that horn didn't grow overnight. It was a slow process, as the old imperial headship of the old head itself is decaying. This allows the devil, brothers and sisters, to slowly leave one throne and go over here. That's why we printed an article years ago, from Rome to the Vatican. Anybody that can't see that, brothers and sisters, I have to say, go get you another pair of glasses. But I'm talking about spiritual glasses, not natural ones. Anyway, I'm going to stop reading about Charlemagne. Because once Charlemagne, he is established and brought the Roman Empire of that hour to the most consistent period, and it was also believed under his hour, he has helped build the church because he forced people. And I know some of you here, you've read about that in history. How that the armies of Europe was used to influence the people. And if they didn't believe in the Catholic faith, brothers and sisters, they was excommunicated. So now then, I'm going to take you quickly to what is called the eighth head, because it covers a period of time. As we pass a period of 100 and some years, we then come and reach an hour of a man called Otto the Great. He had the same ambitions that Charlemagne had. The empire of Charlemagne, restored by Otto the Great, came to be called in latter centuries, and I remember this myself in some of the histories when I was a child going to school, called the Holy Roman Empire. It really didn't hold that title until the Pope now is sitting in domination over it. The title points to the idea of a world monarchy, the Roman Empire, and a world religion, Roman Christianity, united into one institution. That's the way the history writes it. This magnificent idea was never fully realized. The popes and the emperors, instead of being bound to each other by the closest ties, were more generally enemies than friends. A large part of medieval history was to turn on this conflict until the empire and the papacy. Now when we go from that, brothers and sisters, we come to the hour. What Otto the Great has done, it's just like, brothers and sisters, he prepared the stage for the final merging. Now we're in the years, brothers and sisters, from 962 going to 1122. Here's where the eighth head really begins to come into power. One might suppose that there could be no interference between Pope and Emperor, since they seem to have separate spheres. It was said that God had made Pope as the successor of St. Peter, supreme in spiritual matters, and the Emperor as heir of the Roman Caesars, supreme in temporal matters. The former ruled men's souls, the latter men's bodies. The two sovereigns thus divided on equal terms the government of the world. The difficulty with this theory was that it did not work. So it was only an idea. But it's the beginning of what eventually, how this eighth head will come along. Because you're dealing with a spiritual thing now, not a political thing. When the Pope claimed certain powers, which were also claimed by the Emperor, a conflict between the two rulers became inevitable. Now refers back to Otto. Otto the Great in 962 AD restored imperial rule in the West, thus founding what in later century came to be known as the Holy Roman Empire. Otto made the city of Rome the imperial capital. He dethroned a pope who proved disobedient to his wishes and on his own authority appointed another. At the same time, Otto exacted from the people of Rome an oath that they would never recognize any popes to whose election the emperor had not consented. Otto's successors repeatedly interfered in elections to the papacy. One strong ruler, Henry III, has become known as the Pope Maker. Now, I realize I'm reading a lot of history, but keep in mind, brothers and sisters, we're wanting to find out how that eighth head got in place. How many realize that? Because you don't add 8 heads. And between Charlemagne, who was the 7th, you have these other transitional leaders. They're each one trying. But we can slowly see the religious spirit of Satan eventually does succeed in gaining the top ladder ring. And that's what I'm looking at. All right. The death of Henry III, which left the empire in weak hands, gave the papacy, I like this part, it gave the papacy a chance to escape the control of the whole secular power. In 1059 AD, a church council held at the Lateran Palace decreed that henceforth the right of choosing the supreme pontiff should belong exclusively to the cardinals, who represented the clergy of Rome. This arrangement tended to prevent any interference. Now then, it tells her how all of this thing was elected and chosen and brought about. Now we come to the 8th head, and he's in place. A remarkable man now became Pope. This was the monk Hildebrand, who on elevation to the papacy took the name of Gregory VII. Gregory devoted all his talents to the advancements of the papacy. A contemporary document, which may have been of his own composition, at any rate expresses his ideas, contains the following statements. In that horn was a mouth speaking great things. You blend the 8th head with the 11th horn because the horn is symbol of power. Keep in mind. How many sees that? It's not another territory power. It's a mystic power. It's the power of ecclesiasticalism, religion. But the head's the brains. How many get that? All right. He alone may dethrone bishops and restore them to office. He is the only person he's the only person whose feet are kissed by all princes. Well, it's never been kissed by me. Now my point is, brothers and sisters, The Pope claims to be the successor of St. Peter. Well, nobody ever kissed Peter's feet. Look when God led him into Cornelius' house. Here's Cornelius, a bunch of Greeks falling prostrate before him. What did Peter say? Get up, we're men just like you are. But here, hundreds of years later, here is a man in an office supposed to have been established by Peter. He's the successor of him. And he's actually saying that his feet may be kissed. That's idolatry. That's satanic. Yes. He may be judged by no one. Now then, it's the blasphemy sticking out. He may absolve from their allegiance the subjects of the wicked. No wonder you could go in and give Mass to pray for your dead relatives. And they can pray them out of purgatory. All of that is a bunch of junk, brothers and sisters. There's no such thing in the Bible. But here, brothers and sisters, is when this stuff starts. The Roman Church never has erred. It's been nothing but that ever since it started. The Roman Church never has erred and never can err. Uh-oh. What's been going on in the priesthood for the last 6,000 or 7,000 years? I mean, 600 or 700 years. We're finding that out in America, aren't we? And did you hear what happened the other day up in the penitentiary? That one man, brothers and sisters, they sent to prison. Another prisoner choked him to death. The Roman Church never has erred and never can err, as the Scriptures testify. Gregory did not originate these doctrines, but he was the first pope who ventured to make a practical application. Now the eighth head is taking his seat, and from here on, brothers and sisters, it's not what the emperor say, it's what the pope says. Gregory soon issued a decree against lay investor. It declared that no emperor, king, duke, marquess, count, or any other lay person should presume to grant investor under pain of excommunication. This decree was a general one applying to all states of Western Europe, the 10 horns. But circumstances was such that it mainly affected Germany. And Henry VI, the ruler of Germany at this time, did not refuse. Now I'm going to quit there, brothers and sisters, because the reason I read that tonight was to show you. The eighth head was actually when imperial power that once belonged to the old Caesars has now been given to the popes, and ecclesiastical power and political power have became one, with the church riding on top. How many realize that? Therefore, he becomes a power to 1,500 and something other. He was that horn, and all the 10 horns bowed in submission to that 11th horn. And what that mouth spoke, they did, or they trembled. And I'll have to say, brothers and sisters, this is absolutely a political, a spiritual breakdown of how the Roman imperial system has evolved through these different periods of time. And keep in mind, them 7 heads, as Gann brought out, are not territorial, geographical heads. They're all political heads representing different periods of time when certain men within that period of time would actually be given that opportunity to stand out as that particular head. That's just as simple as the nose on your face. Because in 96 AD, brothers and sisters, Rome has not yet evolved to even the beginning of any of this. It's still one great imperial head. But from 96 is when she starts. And I'm thankful to God tonight. And the reason I felt to do this, brothers and sisters, in the months that's ahead, and God's going to unite a people, I'm not telling you that you have to understand every little portion of the picture. But if you've got any spirituality about you at all, you can get a little picture that is satisfying to your own understanding. And there's where, brothers and sisters, you need to have some confidence in somebody, that when he is endeavoring to tell you, God's going to see to it that he tells you the fact. First off, brothers and sisters, God never gave these visions to John. He gave it to him to write it, knowing John would never understand it in his day. And he didn't worry about it. But I'm thankful we're living in a day, that which has been written, God's going to take it off of the pages and put it in a picture in our spiritual minds. Heavenly Father, tonight, I pray that, God, you'll take these simple things we've read, and, Lord, help each one of us to realize what is a picture in biblical prophecy. When we see it in its rightful meaning, we can see how it relates to time, world events, how they've all evolved. And you've watched over your word to see that it all come to pass precisely, accurately, the way your prophetic picture has declared it. Help us all, Lord, in these final days to have a clear picture, Lord, that we can truly be united in one mind, in one accord. Bless every brother, every sister, and help us all in the days to come, because, Lord, we know we're entering a season now that you're going to unite your people. Lord, I pray and thank you for the mercy you have allowed me to see and have. Bless my brothers, and be with all your servants all over the world. They that hear my voice and know what we're talking, may, God, you drop the picture on their hearts and minds and lives. And may from the ends of the earth, Lord, we all see the same picture, as you will deal and work with your people the world over. Because the end picture is we will all be saying the same thing, because you're getting us ready for that going home. Lord, I pray now in Jesus Christ's name. Amen. Thank you tonight, Lord. Amen.